Happy Monday. I'm just on my way up to a apartment that we bought recently. I've got a gentleman who is just seen another property with us who works with Birmingham Council to lease the buildings off landlords, so supported housing and that type of stuff. They take your properties off you for like 3 to 5 years or something, give you a decent rent on it. So just another exit strategy for us. We thought we'd let him look at a house and an apartment and see what he can bring, really. And when I first started out in property, none of this really was well, at least at the time, 10 years ago or so, I didn't know about all this. You know, it was just buy the house, put a tenant in there on an AST, and then collect your rent. But nowadays, there seems to be a lot more exit strategies, if you like. So you can use, you know, Airbnb, service accommodation, hotels.com, that sort of thing. And you've also got these supported accommodation type companies who have contracts with councils, and I don't really understand the mechanics of it, to be honest. I'm just sort of the landlord in the middle. We've leased a few over to them now, and touch wood, all being well, they've never missed a payment. Again, I don't really know what goes on, and that might be a little bit naive on my part. I do make sure that there aren't, you know, they don't turn them into HMOs and all that stuff. I do make sure that everything remains a single family unit in this aspect, because I know a lot of the guys who go on these courses, they lease the properties off you and then turn them into shit HMOs, and that ain't good enough in my opinion. So I don't allow that to happen. But if you get a 5-year lease off one of these companies and it's government backed, which is to say that the councils are funding them, then that's a good deal for hands-off investors. And I'm not a landlord in the normal sense of the word, really. I don't want to be managing tenants and all that stuff. So when you can pass the properties over to these guys for a prolonged period of time, that sort of ticks that box. So I met the young guy earlier who proposed to take a couple of our properties off us on long-term supported living type contracts. Looks like there's a deal to be done, to be fair, but when I was speaking to him, he was much newer than I am into the game. I think he's been in it 2 or 3 years, and he was asking me some questions as he was frustrated that he can't get more traction than he thought he could get. He wants to buy his own stock because he's leasing it off other people and doing all these fancy things that they teach on these courses nowadays, right? But he wants to buy things, but he hasn't got the capital to do it. And when I asked him why, it was because he was using the wrong products, right? Now, when I first started out, I was using buy-to-let mortgages, and I was doing the properties up and then remortgaging them, and that's a good way to do it, right? It's better than doing nothing. But 10 years ago, when I first started out, there was the bridging market, the bridging finance market was completely different to what it was today. Today, there seems at least that many more companies and that much more capital to borrow from. The market's got massive compared to what it was 10 years ago. And it's evolved and adapted, in my opinion, to supply the demand, because there's a huge demand for bridging short-term finance. And this guy, he was using long-term finance products such as buy-to-let mortgages, commercial mortgages, more buy-to-let in this instance, instead of using private finance and bridging. Now, if you haven't been in the industry that long, you probably won't have that much investor capital yet, because I don't know, you haven't built the relationships or whatever. Fair enough. That I didn't get proper angel investment probably till 3 or 4 years into the me buying property, to be fair. So if you haven't been doing it that long, you shouldn't really expect to, unless you're really churning out deals, right? Because people want to trust you. They need to know what you're doing. However, bridging is available to more or less everybody if the deal is good. If the deal is good, bridging companies will look at it regardless of you. It's more to do with the asset than it is the person, because they secure their money, usually 70-75% loan to value, but they will secure it against an asset that they feel is very secure. Whereas buy-to-let lenders will ask for more personal details. They'll want to know how much money you're earning, how much money you're spending every month, all that type of information, right? So the guy earlier was actually using buy-to-let type financing and other long-term products instead of using private finance and bridging. Now, if let's use, I don't know, £100,000 there for an example as figures, right? A bridging loan, let's say 100 grand, 1% per month, that's 12% per annum. So we get there 12 grand, right? Fees, you're probably going to be paying, these are all round figures, but you know, we'll just make it pretty simple. 2 grand arrangement fee, and you're probably going to be paying 1,500 quid for legals and survey valuation. Don't forget, you've also got your own legal fees on top of this, but we won't put that in because you have to pay, generally you pay the bridging company's legal fees. So on this loan, for simplicity again, we're going to add these fees onto the loan, because with bridging you have a gross loan and you have a net loan. So the gross loan in this instance is going to be 2,000 plus 1,500, that's 3.5 grand, plus your interest. So you're going to be 115,500 quid. You're probably going to get a little bit more on that with added fees and whatever, but let's keep it simple, 115,500 quid. Your net loan is going to be your 100k. That's what you're going to walk away with on day one. So you've gone to your mortgage broker or directly to the bridging company and you've said, I need £100,000. They've worked it out, blah, blah, blah. Yep, they can lend you a net figure of 100,000 and you're going to have to pay back 115,500 in 12 months' time. That's a bridging loan, right? Very simple. Now, with a buy-to-let mortgage, £100,000, you might only be paying 5% per annum, which is £5,000 in interest, which is 417 quid per month, interest only, right? Two completely different products, and most people will go, oh, it's only 5%, and that's only 12%. That's too much. That's more where I want to be at, right? That's what people think. True, it's a lot cheaper, and if that's all you're looking at, it would be the best deal. However, if you want to buy a property and sell it within 6 months, and you go with a buy-to-let mortgage, you're going to be stung with big fees, and mortgage lenders don't like it. So if you go back to that lender again, they may say no because you sold the property after buying it within 6 months, for example. They don't like you to do that. It's a long-term product. A buy-to-let mortgage is long-term. I've just took out a commercial mortgage, for example. We'll use 100 grand again as a figure. In the first year, I'll be paying 5% penalty. Second year, 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%. And then after year 5, I'm out of the fees because it's a 5-year fixed term. So these have fixed terms, usually 2, 5 or 10-year fixes, usually 2 or 5. But if you pay the loan back before the fixed term is up, you will incur penalties, as I do here. Right? I know that as I go into the loan. Right? Whereas with the bridging loan, if you haven't got capital right now, you need to build capital, or at least go outside to through private investors to raise that capital. Now, bridging is great for capital strategies, capital building strategies, which is flipping, trading through the auctions, and it's also good to get hold of a property that these guys won't touch yet until you, for example, put the kitchen in. If there's a house without a kitchen, you can't get a mortgage on it. If there's some structural issues, you can't get a mortgage on it. You can acquire it with a bridge and then flip it onto a buy-to-let loan. However, you have to make sure that this will refinance this unless you have cash to be able to pay the remaining interest off the loan, right? So when would you use a bridging loan? You'd use a bridging loan for something that needs speed. Make sure the bridging company is good, because nowadays a lot of them take just as long as a normal mortgage. So make sure they're good, they're efficient, they've got speedy solicitors. You do it for an unmortgageable property. You'd either use bridging or cash, private investor money. You'd use it to, if you were going to do some heavy refurbishment work and then flip it onto a buy-to-let mortgage or a commercial mortgage. There are numerous lenders now who actually offer bridging to long-term products. I think Shawbrook, Interbay do it as well. I think Paragon, I think. So they'll give you a bridging product and then you can flip that onto their buy-to-let product once you've done the work. So they have two different entities, if you like, doing the different financing. Buy-to-let and commercial mortgages, if it's already got a tenant in place, and I don't know, let's say on this instance he's paying £800 a month and you know your mortgage is going to be £417 a month for the next 5 years, fine. If that's it's probably a slow route that you're going down. Whereas this, speed, velocity, you're turning things around quicker. And if you can refinance everything back out, you can go again. With bridging companies, you can very often build relationships with them. Usually they're high net worth individuals who has set up a company to lend money out to other businesses, to other investors and developers. So you can build better relationships, in my opinion, with bridging companies than you can with big, organizations such as, I don't know, the Mortgage Works, for example. Although they have lower fees with the bigger companies, they're also cumbersome. It takes a long time to get them through. They're very inefficient. Solicitors are just run-of-the-mill solicitors, and they're very poor, in my opinion. Whereas bridging, we've got a guy a bridging company, and they've just got a solicitor in-house. He gets it all done in no time, which is great, right? So use this for short-term stuff. Between 1 and 24 months, but usually 12, usually. Doesn't mean you can't negotiate different. As again, these are much more negotiable than these guys. You do these for longer term. That's buy-to-let and commercial. You'll be on commercial stuff. You'll be paying between 7 and 9% in today's rates instead of 5. So longer term, usually 2, 5, or 10-year fixed, with heavy penalties if you get out of that loan, out of that mortgage before your fixed term is up. So the guy I spoke to earlier, if he actually opened his eyes to bridging finance and private investor capital today, he would, I know he would, because the way he was communicating, he's a smart cookie, he would scale a lot quicker. It's not about the rate necessarily, it's about everything else that's involved, the bigger picture and the bigger context. Yes, they're very, what I tend to find as well is that they're quite to the point, right? If you're going to miss your deadline of repayment, they won't mess about, bridging companies won't mess about, but they'll have a conversation with you. And if you're completely open and transparent with them, they will communicate. You might have to pay a sizable penalty. Touch wood, we've never had that yet. And touch wood, we won't have to, but I know of people who bridging companies have come down hard on them because they haven't communicated with them and they've gone over their term. So in and out, hold this for the long term. You can very often, by using this, flip onto this. It doesn't have to be the same company as I mentioned earlier. It can be any, as long as these guys get their money back. They don't care where you go. They don't care what you do with it. Cash flow wise, this helps a lot because usually the interest is retained. Retained interest, which means you don't pay monthly payments. You don't pay £1,000 a month on the loan. It's added to the loan. So you have a gross loan and a net loan. The interest is retained, which means it's in this figure here. So you don't have any monthly payments. You just have to make sure that when you exit the loan, it has the juice in it to be able to pay it back. I hope that helped. You don't need to go and pay tens of thousands of pounds for property mentorships. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I generally avoided all that industry. But some people, because I've started making YouTube videos, have messaged me saying, what do you think of blah, blah? And I look at how much money some of these guys charge and it's a joke. You don't need to waste your money. Vast majority of it is on YouTube for free. The implementation and the experience you get by actually doing things, far more valuable than ever sitting in a room. The only thing, in my opinion, beneficial about sitting in that room is networking and picking up good contacts. That's it. the vast majority of these teachers make more money teaching than they do in property. So make sure you choose wisely.